There are legends whose brilliance feels larger than life. And then there is Lucille Ball, a woman whose laughter shaped the heartbeat of America. For decades she stood beneath the studio lights with a spark that seemed unbreakable, her voice filling living rooms with joy, her timing so perfect, it felt like magic. But behind that radiant smile lived a story far more human, far more fragile, and far more courageous than most ever knew. Lucille's life was a journey marked by loss, drive, reinvention, and a relentless commitment to make the world laugh even when her own heart felt heavy. Today we look beyond the familiar reruns and timeless scenes. We step past the bright red hair and flawless comedic timing. We return to the girl from Jamestown, the young woman chasing opportunity, the trailblazer who redefined television, and finally, the aging icon facing the truth of her own mortality. Her final days broke the hearts of those who loved her, not because they revealed weakness, but because they revealed the depth of the life she carried. And now, at last, we understand why. Long before the world knew her as the queen of television comedy, Lucille Ball was simply a determined girl from Jamestown, New York, carrying hopes far bigger than the life she was born into. She entered the world in the year 1911, a time when opportunity for young women was narrow, and dreams were often dismissed before they could fully form. Her childhood was shaped by instability and loss, beginning with the death of her father when she was just 3 years old. His passing left the family shaken and forced her mother to navigate life alone, working tirelessly to keep them afloat. For Lucille, this early grief carved a quiet emptiness, but it also planted something else, something that would later define her career, a deep need to bring joy where sadness once lived. Her mother, Desi, remarried and sought to rebuild their lives, but the years that followed were challenging. Lucille found comfort not in the security of home, but in imagination. She discovered early on that laughter could soften the world around her. Even as a child, she understood how humor lifted spirits, and she began shaping herself into a vessel of joy, almost instinctively. Those who knew her in those early years described a girl who seemed both shy and fearless, a contradiction that would one day become her trademark. At the age of 15, Lucille convinced her mother to let her pursue acting. She left Jamestown for New York City with a determination that was rare for someone so young. She enrolled in drama school in the year 1926, but the instructors there saw little promise in her. They labeled her too quiet, too awkward, too unusual to succeed. It was a painful blow, yet it did not deter her. Instead, it fueled her resolve. Lucille understood, even then, that brilliance was not always recognized in classrooms. She left the school and found work as a model, then began appearing in small film roles, each one a small step forward in a career that seemed to grow out of pure tenacity rather than opportunity. By the 1930s, she made her way to Hollywood, where she was cast in dozens of films, often in minor roles. She became known as the Queen of the B-movies, a title that held neither glamour nor recognition, but Lucille embraced it. She treated every role as practice, every line as preparation. Nothing was wasted. Behind the scenes, she watched the great performers carefully, studying timing, movement, and subtlety. She understood that comedy was an art form built on rhythm, and she trained herself relentlessly. Her personal life during these early years was often marked by uncertainty. Hollywood was a place that tested confidence and exhausted dreams, but Lucille never let discouragement settle into her bones. She built resilience piece by piece, teaching herself how to rise each time a door closed. Underneath the polished curls and bright lipstick, she carried the memories of every struggle she had survived. Those moments of hardship were not flaws in her story. They were the foundation of the strength the world would one day celebrate. By the end of the 1940s, still searching for her true place in Hollywood, Lucille was unknowingly approaching the turning point of her life. She had spent years preparing without knowing what she was preparing for. The world had not yet seen what she was capable of. But soon Lucille Ball would step into the role that would change television, and her life, forever. By the time the 1950s arrived, Lucille Ball had spent nearly 2 decades in Hollywood, working tirelessly yet waiting for a role that truly reflected her talent. What the world did not see was how close she had come to walking away from acting altogether. Behind the bright lights and studio contracts, Lucille carried a quiet fear that her career might never expand beyond small roles. But life, as it often does, shifted in an unexpected way. What began as a radio comedy, My Favorite Husband, positioned her at a crossroads that would forever redefine her place in the entertainment industry. When CBS approached Lucille in the year 1950 to adapt the radio show for television, she agreed on one condition: her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, would play her on-screen partner. Television executives resisted fiercely. They doubted audiences would accept a Cuban-born bandleader and an American actress as a married couple on screen. They underestimated Lucille's determination. She and Desi took the challenge into their own hands, traveling across the United States with a live vaudeville-style show that proved audiences not only accepted them, but adored them. Their success led CBS to greenlight the series that would eventually become one of the most beloved shows in television history. I Love Lucy premiered in the year 1951, and from the moment it aired, something extraordinary happened. Viewers bonded with the show instantly. Lucille's comedic brilliance, her mastery of timing, and her willingness to embrace physical comedy set her apart from anything television had seen before. She transformed everyday misunderstandings into unforgettable scenes, blending sincerity and silliness in a way that felt both familiar and groundbreaking. Working alongside Desi brought new layers to her creativity, but it also demanded immense emotional resilience. While their on-screen chemistry was effortless, their marriage carried strains that fame often intensified. Yet through every difficulty, Lucille remained committed to the work. She believed in the show, and she believed in Desi's talent as deeply as she believed in her own. Together they revolutionized television production, forming Desilu Productions, and pioneering the use of multiple cameras, live audiences, and film recordings that preserved each episode for generations to come. As I Love Lucy soared across the nation, Lucille evolved rapidly as both an artist and a leader. She became the heartbeat of the series, guiding humor with precision while carrying the weight of a demanding schedule. Filming while pregnant with her son, Desi Arnaz Jr., in the year 1952 marked a rare moment of vulnerability and triumph. It was nearly unheard of to portray pregnancy on television, and yet Lucille's honesty made it acceptable, even celebrated. The birth episode drew an unprecedented audience, becoming one of the most watched broadcasts in history. Success brought admiration, but it also came with expectations that were difficult to manage. Lucille was not simply acting. She was shaping the medium. Her influence rippled across the industry in ways she never sought but always shouldered with grace. Though the world saw a performer with endless joy, the truth was more complex. Each laugh came from years of discipline. Each scene was crafted with meticulous detail. Lucille's dedication was so profound that co-workers often spoke of her as both an artist and an architect of television itself. By the mid-1950s, Lucille Ball had transcended her early struggles. She had become a household name, a cultural icon, and the core of a show that reshaped entertainment forever. Yet behind her triumphs, she remained the same girl from Jamestown, resilient, hopeful, and still driven by that childhood desire to bring joy where sadness once lingered. As the 1950s progressed, Lucille Ball found herself at the center of a cultural revolution she never could have predicted. I Love Lucy was no longer simply a successful program. It had woven itself into the daily rhythm of American life. Families planned their evenings around new episodes, and newspapers reported television ratings with the same excitement reserved for major national events. But behind the growing empire was a woman carrying both the joy of accomplishment and the strain of relentless responsibility. Lucille stood at a unique crossroads during this time. With Desilu Productions expanding rapidly, she balanced her role as a performer with the increasing demands of being a business partner. She and Desi Arnaz oversaw a groundbreaking studio operation that would go on to produce some of the most influential shows in history, including The Untouchables, Mission Impossible, and later Star Trek. Each decision required careful attention, and Lucille approached every task with the same precision she brought to her comedy. She reviewed scripts closely, studied blocking thoroughly, and held herself accountable for maintaining the high standard that audiences had come to expect. Her dedication, however, came with emotional cost. Long days on set blended into long nights of rehearsals, and the fullness of fame offered little space for rest. Lucille understood that every episode, every scene, was more than entertainment. It shaped the future of Desilu, the livelihood of the hundreds of employees who depended on the studio, and the legacy she and Desi were building together. The weight of that knowledge created a tension she rarely expressed publicly, but those closest to her recognized the depth of her commitment. As the show moved through its later seasons, Lucille's work became increasingly refined. Her instincts were so finely tuned that fellow actors often said she could sense the rhythm of a scene before it fully formed. She believed comedy was musical at its core, and she treated each episode as a performance that needed to be orchestrated carefully. Her training in drama, her years in film, and her natural ability to read an audience all merged into a style of acting that few have ever matched. Yet beneath the brilliance was a woman navigating the complexity of her marriage. She and Desi shared a profound connection, but the demands of fame, business pressures, and their contrasting temperaments created strain that neither could fully escape. Lucille poured herself into her work, not as avoidance, but as a way to hold steady in a world that was changing rapidly around her. She protected her family fiercely, and she believed deeply in the studio they built together. Still, the emotional labor of balancing everything left marks that she carried quietly. By the late 1950s, I Love Lucy transitioned into hour-long specials known as the Lucy and Desi Comedy Hour. Though the public continued to embrace them, the pace proved difficult to maintain. Lucille recognized that the comedy they created was rooted in authenticity, and she refused to deliver anything less. She understood that the heart of the show was not just laughter, but the humanity beneath it. When Lucille and Desi divorced in the year 1960, the world mourned the end of what had seemed like an unshakable partnership. Yet the truth was far more tender than any headline could capture. They continued to work together at Desilu. They remained devoted to their children, and they held fast to a deep respect that would last throughout their lives. Lucille's rise had not been effortless. It had been earned through persistence, discipline, and a love for storytelling that never dimmed. As she stepped into the next chapter of her life, she carried with her not only the legacy of I Love Lucy, but the strength that comes from knowing she had shaped an art form through sheer force of will. There are moments in every life when purpose reveals itself with startling clarity, and for Lucille Ball that moment arrived when she stepped onto a television set and felt the world shift beneath her feet. By the early 1950s, she had lived through enough uncertainty and rejection to recognize the rare spark of something enduring. Television was still young, unpredictable, untested, yet Lucille saw possibility where others saw chaos. She sensed that this new medium could hold stories in ways film and radio never had, and she poured her whole self into shaping what it would become. When I Love Lucy premiered in 1951, no one could have predicted its impact. Lucille, working side by side with Desi Arnaz, reinvented the rhythm of television comedy. Her physical humor, meticulously rehearsed and grounded in truth, offered a kind of joy that felt both timeless and immediate. Viewers saw in her a mirror of their own lives, their own imperfections, their own longing to laugh through the hard days. She gave people permission to find lightness within struggle, and in doing so became a national touchstone. Within months, the series wasn't simply popular, it was transformational. Behind the scenes, Lucille worked with a precision few understood. She studied camera angles, timing, and audience reactions with the discipline of a scientist. She and Desi insisted on filming in front of a live audience, a choice that brought an authenticity no one had captured before. They introduced the three-camera filming system that would become standard across the industry, a technical innovation so effective that it shaped television language for generations. Lucille was not just performing, she was architecting the future of a medium that had barely found its footing. As the show's success grew, so did her responsibilities. She worked long hours, balancing the demands of motherhood with the pressure of delivering weekly episodes that millions now expected. But within that intensity, she discovered a strength she had not fully understood in herself. She was building something larger than entertainment, something that carried forward the dreams she'd held as a young girl in Jamestown. Every episode was a testament to endurance, to creativity, to the belief that art mattered even when the world felt heavy. By 1957, she and Desi expanded their vision through Desilu Studios, a company that would become the largest independent television studio in the country. Lucille, often underestimated because she was a woman in a male-dominated industry, stepped into leadership with a clarity that surprised those who doubted her. When she purchased Desi's shares in 1962, she became the first woman in American history to run a major television studio. It was not a title she sought for recognition, but one she earned through years of persistent work and unwavering dedication. Under her guidance, Desilu produced some of television's most iconic series, including Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Lucille recognized potential in projects others dismissed as too strange or too ambitious. She had learned long ago that creativity flourished when given room to grow, and she trusted instinct as deeply as she trusted craft. Her decisions helped shape the direction of American storytelling, influencing the kinds of narratives that would reach living rooms for decades. Through these years she remained, at her core, a performer. She cherished laughter not as a distraction but as a form of connection, a bridge between people who might otherwise never meet. Her impact stretched far beyond ratings or industry awards. She altered the landscape of television with a combination of courage, vision, and an unshakable commitment to her craft. And as the world changed around her, she continued to carry the same deep resolve that had carried her through every early hardship. Her journey was still unfolding, and her resilience remained the quiet engine behind all she created. As the 1960s unfolded into the 1970s, Lucille Ball found herself standing at a crossroads that every artist eventually meets. The world had changed, audiences had changed, and yet the public's affection for her remained unwavering. After decades spent shaping the heart of American comedy, she stepped into her later work with the same determination that had carried her through her earliest struggles. When The Lucy Show premiered in 1962, followed by Here's Lucy in 1968, she once again proved that her connection to audiences was something enduring, something rooted not in trend, but in truth. People did not just watch Lucille, they trusted her. She had become a steady presence in living rooms across the country, a reminder of the joy that could be found even in the most uncertain times. Yet behind that cheerful presence was a woman balancing immense responsibility. Running Desilu had brought extraordinary achievements, but it had also demanded constant sacrifice. When she sold the studio in 1967, it marked the end of a monumental chapter. She had carried the weight of innovation for years, and now she sought something quieter, something that allowed her to return to her first love, performing. Even as she aged, she refused to let the changing industry push her aside. She worked on television specials, film roles, and guest appearances, always pursuing the spark of connection she had devoted her life to preserving. In her personal life, she embraced the rhythms of maturity with an honesty shaped by everything she had lived through. Her marriage to Gary Morton, beginning in 1961, brought stability after the turbulence of her earlier years. He supported her ambitions without expectation and offered companionship that complemented her fiercely independent spirit. Their partnership helped steady her through the transitions that inevitably come with time, allowing her to experience a gentler form of daily life than the one she had navigated during her most demanding years. As the decades passed, Lucille became something larger than an entertainer. She became a symbol of perseverance, a reminder of how deeply one person's work could shape a cultural landscape. Her influence touched comedians, writers, directors, and performers who had grown up watching her shows and studying her timing. She inspired countless young women who saw in her a possibility they had been told did not exist, the possibility of leading, creating, and commanding respect in an industry that had historically closed its doors to them. Museums, archives, and television historians would eventually catalog her achievements, but the truest evidence of her impact lived in the generations who continued to laugh because of what she created. In the late 1980s, as her health began to falter, Lucille carried herself with the same dignity she had shown throughout her life. She made select appearances, attending award ceremonies and interviews that celebrated her legacy. She was honored with the Kennedy Center Honors in 1986, a recognition that acknowledged not only her contributions to entertainment but the imprint she left on American culture. Those who met her in these years often remarked on her grace, her sharp wit, and her ability to make others feel at ease. Even when her body began to slow, her spirit remained luminous. Her final days arrived quietly in the spring of 1989. After undergoing surgery in Los Angeles to repair a weakened aorta, she spent time recovering in the hospital, surrounded by those who loved her. Though complications followed, she faced them with the same resolve that had defined her life. On the morning of her passing, the world paused. News spread with a solemn stillness, not because people were unprepared, but because losing her felt like losing a familiar voice, one that had guided them through joy, hardship, and change. Lucille Ball left behind a legacy woven into the fabric of television itself. She had transformed an industry, shaped generations of artists, and carried the weight of trailblazing with courage. Her story did not end in sorrow. It ended in gratitude. Gratitude for a life lived with purpose, for laughter that bridged divides, and for a woman whose brilliance continued to echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. In the end, Lucille Ball's life became something far greater than the sum of her achievements. She had stepped into the world with little more than determination and an unshakable belief that she could make people feel less alone. From her earliest struggles in Jamestown to her groundbreaking years in Hollywood, she shaped comedy in ways no one had imagined possible. And yet, when the spotlight finally dimmed, what remained was not simply the laughter she created, but the courage she carried. Her final days revealed the depth of the bond she shared with audiences who had grown up watching her, loving her, and finding comfort in her work. People from every generation felt the loss as if a member of their own family had slipped away. But Lucille's story was never defined by that ending. It was defined by the joy she offered the world, the barriers she broke, and the quiet resilience she held through every triumph and every difficulty. Her legacy lives in the echoes of laughter, still heard across living rooms today, reminding us that her presence, her brilliance, and her heart never truly left us. For more emotional stories, check out this video.